Aloha, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this workshop this evening. My name is Joel Rathje, and I'll be facilitating our time together today. First, I'd like to introduce the speakers that are joining us this evening. Tonight, we're going to hear from Zendo Kern, Planning Department Director, Bethany Morrison with the Office of Sustainability, Climate, Equity, and Resilience, April Soprenet, Long Range Planning Manager, and Natasha Soriano, Senior Transportation Planner. This slide illustrates the different public workshops and community meetings that are taking place over the next couple of months. The difference between the public workshops and community meetings is that the community meetings will be a little more focused on the immediate geography surrounding those communities. A recording of the public workshops will be available online. Today's panel will provide a quick overview of the general plan's purpose, the process, and the framework. Most of the time will be spent walking through the different elements or sections of the draft general plan. Lastly, we'll let you know what's next after these workshops and the process going forward. The time we have for this evening is about 2 hours. For questions, we'll use the Zoom question and answer function, and we will pause a few times to ask questions of the panel. The question and answer button can be found at the bottom of your screen, as shown in this slide. Please keep in mind that we may not have time to answer all of the questions submitted. Any remaining questions will be added to the frequently asked questions on our website. Any questions not related to the general plan will not be answered. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Planning Director, Zendo Kern.
Thank you, Joel. Aloha, friends. Zendo Kern, Planning Director. Pleasure to be here. Thank you all for joining us about a very important matter, our general plan for our Hawaii County. We're going to get into the purpose of the general plan. The purpose of the general plan is really, it's that high-level guiding plan that will really direct our long-range policy for comprehensive physical, economic, environmental, and social cultural well-being for the county. It's that high-level plan. It's that guide and direction, land use settlement patterns. Also, it's intended to have the different aspects and departments of the county actually function together well in our plan to work together collaboratively. So in additional terms, it provides a long-range vision of creating healthy, livable, and sustainable communities, while also serving as a planning tool used to guide decisions to help achieve that vision. So a very awesome plan, and very much needed to guide our county moving forward. So talking about the framework of the general plan and kind of the umbrella of the planning system, that general plan is say that 30,000, 40,000 foot elevation, very, very high level. And that's very broad. It's covering an entire island. And as you know, we have a very big, diverse island with a lot of different, subcultures in it and a lot of different needs on the island. So at that high level, we come up with a plan and direction as an island and as a community that we can all basically agree to, for the most part, that's directional. And then as that moves down, we move into more of the specifics of our community, say down to like a community development plan or a special area plan that gets more specific to those needs of our community. And then as that continues to go down, we move into parallel to that, we move into functional plans such as, water plans, wastewater plans. Those are plans generally more around a department and specific to a general, say, neighborhood, street, or region. And then all the way down to our code. And then, as I say, boots hitting the ground down to our actual permitting process on how you'd actually build something. So it's this overarching way that's really, really important. It also recognizes that the general plan is broad, it's island-wide, it's a long-range plan that does not provide for the specific development or regional requirements. We leave that to the CDPs and codes. But it's also meant to evolve as our communities evolve. And that's why the plan needs to be dynamic. It needs to be something that can go through changes and adjustments because we don't know what's coming. We weren't anticipating, say, COVID 5 or 6 years ago. And so the plan needs to be, dynamic in that way. So moving on to what the general plan is not really quickly, it's not the detailed plan. It's not a master plan. It's really about that, overarching, broad, island-wide, long range. And then we move into the other areas for more of the specifics. So the scope of the general plan, it's really this intersection between, our health, safety, infrastructure, housing, recreational open spaces, natural and cultural resources, and our land use. It contains all these elements, but also links them together. And it's both interfacing to the county and outward facing to our community. And it's another mechanism to hold the county, responsible as the various departments can work together and give clear direction from a community perspective on how things are moving forward. It's really the key elements create about creating a healthy, safe, and resilient community, a sustainable and responsible development, thriving, diverse, and regenerative economy, collaborative cultural and environmental stewardship, and an efficient, equitable, and integrated government. That's how all that mixes together. So the comprehensive review process. Where have we been? This is our fourth general plan. First one came out in 1971, followed by another in 1989. The current general plan that we're working off of is 2005, and this is the comprehensive review that was initiated in 2015. So we're excited that this is our fourth one. Our county is maturing and growing, and this plan really, I think, articulates that and brings in other elements that the team will share a bit later. So what have we been doing? 2015, the initial comprehensive review started. The team, when I say the team, the planning department team, consultants, stakeholders, et cetera, worked on putting together a draft. In 2019, that draft was out for initial public review, which was a myriad of different policies, ideas, and concepts. And it was actually really awesome. It created this really robust menu of different elements that we were able to take those public comments and then continue to work on those over the next few years into 2023, coming up with this current draft. And we took that out for more public comment, more review, made more adjustments based on that comment review. And then in July 29th of this year, we released the final recommended draft. And that's what we're presenting to you all right now. Now, the project timeline and the outreach timeline, I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can see the project timeline to 2015, 2019, as I had talked about. We also went through, lava flows, COVID, and all kinds of stuff that was occurring. Meanwhile, that we were continually working on that plan. But those elements and those things that occurred, say COVID, lava, also helped inform the plan as we needed to move forward and continue to make it a dynamic, robust plan that worked across our entire island. A lot of community outreach went in there, and from county council presentations to, I'm just going to get into the next slide because this next slide really illustrates how many public meetings, how much outreach, how many comments we've received. As you can see, in-person workshops, technical workshops, 27 roadshow community events, 47 action committee meetings, engaged over 4,000 people. We've had thousands of comments, from 2019, 4,000 plus comments, in 2023, 2,500 plus comments. So it's been a very, say, robust conversation about how we move our island forward. And again, at that very high level. And so as you can probably imagine, you've probably planned something in the past with, say, family or a group, and maybe you're planning a trip to Disney and you wanted to do all these things, but you were doing it with a group. And so as you're doing with the group, you're all collecting your inputs and you come up with this plan of what you're going to do at Disney and how you're going to navigate it around. If the group's kind of big, you don't necessarily get everything you want, but you come up with a plan that works for the entire group. Same concept here, same process. Going through this very large process because it's big island, lots of comments, and now coming up with a plan that works across the board for all of us to continue our journey forward. So that's basically commenting on how this, the balancing act is really the trick, honoring the input, honoring our place, honoring the process, and really trying to balance these balls in different ways. And it's been quite an intense experience. And really want to honor the team members that have been going through this, because they're constantly getting this feedback, these inputs, and then trying to come out with solutions and how that reflects, objectives, policies, goals, and honoring all of this. Even though we don't necessarily agree on all of it, it's really threading that needle. And I think this image really illustrates that. So what are the next steps from here? Like I said, the final director recommended draft was released on the 29th. We'll be doing these final public workshops as well as the community outreach. And then on September 26th, we have our public comments due. And then from there, it'll make its way to the planning commissions, Windward Planning Commissions, Leeward Planning Commissions, starting on October 28th. And once the planning commissions have their conversation there, it'll make its way to county council. This process is, as you can see on the slide, we have different timeframes within that we're all hitting. So those timeframes are fixed, and those are the maximum timeframes before it'll go through this process and make its way to the county council. And now I will turn it over to April to look at the framework used to create and organize this draft. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zendo. Aloha, everyone. So the vision statement that really has that has come out of all of the work that's been done and sort of that balancing act that Zendo spoke to, the community values included in the adopted community development plans and various other community master plans have been synthesized to form a singular island-wide vision statement, which really represents the ability to plan for the future in alignment with those community values. This is the first comprehensive review of the general plan to integrate the values, principles, and practices of sustainability consistent with our traditional systems and ecological stewardship. It focuses on the balance of creating a livable built environment, harmony with nature, a resilient economy, interwoven equity, and healthy communities, as well as responsible regional planning. So we've just gone over the vision of the plan in terms of components, and we will also touch on tonight the goals and objectives of the different sections and elements of the plan. But even more detailed, you'll find as you review the document, are the policies and actions. And those are really the more detailed pieces that will guide us to implementing the goals and objectives. This is a quick snapshot of the different chapters and elements. There are 6 chapters and I believe 22 sections or elements within. And so we've just basically covered the introduction that's in the plan. Tonight we'll also hear about the collective biocultural stewardship section, which is our natural and cultural resources, adapting to climate change. Sustainable development will be specific to elements for the built environment. Then we'll touch on a thriving economy and then the implementation section of the plan. So now I am going to pass the baton to Bethany to kick us off on collaborative biocultural stewardship.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bethany Morrison with the Office of Sustainability, Climate, Equity, and Resilience, but I'm also here tonight as a previous member of the planning team for the general plan. The first section I want to talk about is our collaborative biocultural stewardship chapter. A couple things I want to highlight is really the orientation of this chapter within the document itself. If we look at the layers of planning, we really understand that to understand where we plan for our infrastructure in our communities, we first need to understand the natural resources and the natural systems of that environment. So it is the first chapter to really outline those systems And then we can think again through how we plan for our infrastructure needs and our community needs from there. Natural and cultural resources really, sorry, April, if you can just go back. Natural and cultural resources really are one resource that we know based on our traditional ecological knowledge of this area and our systems here in Hawaii. Collaborative biocultural stewardship, although that's a mouthful, it really emphasizes the need for collaboration and partnership, building among stakeholders, and refers to, again, the integration of those cultural and natural resources. For the biocultural stewardship goal, it really is that all natural and cultural resources are thriving and sustainably managed, preserved and restored to maintain our unique and diverse environment. So really thinking about those natural and cultural resources and making sure that they are here for future generations. The objectives here really focus on our biodiversity, the function of our watersheds, our unique scenic character, our historic and scenic resources. But finally, the one I want to highlight tonight is how we are increasing direct community restoration and collaborative efforts. Again, thinking about how resources are traditionally managed and recognizing that these resources don't follow jurisdictional boundaries. It's very important that we look towards our partners and other agencies to make sure that we're managing these resources collectively and collaboratively. And then finally, wanted to highlight the natural beauty sites section of the plan. Here, you'll see a snapshot of the map and the table that's in the document. I'm really pointing to the natural beauty sites that we have on our island and making sure that we can protect those views through land use decisions and reviews. Also worth noting that this information was updated by a scenic resources study that was completed as part of this general plan update. And now moving into the chapter on adapting to climate change. This is a very unique chapter for this plan. It does not exist in the 2005 plan. And so this is the first time the general plan is really speaking towards climate change issues. It's also unique because it speaks to a number of other sections of the plan that really deal with how we're going to solve for some of our issues and the impacts that we're already feeling. So if we think about transportation, knowing that that is our biggest user of energy and one of our targets for greenhouse gas reduction, we'll look to that chapter to think about how we can reduce those vehicle miles traveled in that section. Similarly, energy and electricity, how can we increase renewable energies and be more efficient? Water and wastewater, how we're using those resources, again, sustainably. And then of course, the land use chapter. Also want to highlight that we have an integrated climate action plan that was adopted in 2023. This really provides the strategic roadmap for the county actions needed for adaptation and mitigation. But it works similarly to the way Zendo was describing. You know, we have the umbrella document of this draft general plan, and then it gets very more specific as you move down that umbrella. And so that climate action plan is one of those specific plans that deals with that issue. And looking at the climate change goal, ensure a just transition to a climate resilient island by addressing the causes and impacts of climate change through incorporating equitable climate mitigation and adaptation priorities into policies, programs, infrastructure, and decision-making. And then 3 main objectives. One, that we really are making sure that any action we take is equitable and uplifts our historically marginalized communities. The second, that we're reducing our county's carbon footprint, headed towards zero emissions by 2045, consistent with the state goal. And finally, that we continue to improve and understand climate threats and adaptation options for our county. And as I mentioned, this chapter really speaks to all the other sections in the plan that help us address these issues and provide us solutions. So I've just incorporated the objectives here. Again, thinking about how we can reduce vehicle miles traveled, making sure we increase protection of drinking water supplies, understanding the connection to our municipal sewer system, increasing our green infrastructure practices, striving towards energy efficiency, achieving zero waste, and finally, and maybe most importantly, that we're increasing collaboration and cooperation across the county.
So now I will start us off in the sustainable development section, and we'll start with land use. So the land use section represents the broader policy direction and look to the community development plans and other master plans for further guidance. They are used to guide land use decisions, to be consistent with the vision and objectives, but are also intended to be broad and flexible. The general plan and the land use maps do not change zoning or other entitlements. So there can sometimes be confusion between zoning and general plan land use designations. So the general plan does not inherently change the underlying zoning. So the goal of the land use section is to strategically apply progressive land use strategies incorporating indigenous and contemporary knowledge and place-based practices to direct and manage growth for the health and safety of our communities. The objectives to further that really speak to maintaining community character and land use compatibility, increasing the integration of natural systems planning, which is what Bethany just spoke to, increasing equitable planning and decision-making processes, as well as reducing the threat to life and property from natural hazards and disasters. This is a snapshot of the changes from the 2005 land use designations to what is proposed in the 2024 draft. They're the same elements that were also in the 2023 draft. But there are some minor changes to the industrial designations, the agriculture designations, and also to the open and recreation designations, and we'll touch on those in just a few minutes. When we look at the urban designations, this is not intended to actually read, but just gives you a snapshot of what you'll find as you review the plan. There are these charts of the different general plan designations for all of the different uses. And we really look to, as what we've referenced already, to the community development plans and master plans. We looked as a goal to create better transitions between different types of uses and different densities. We absolutely have incorporated a lot of public comments throughout the process, which I understand has been over some years, but we have included the input to the best of our ability. Again, as Zendo spoke to that balance that we always have to consider, and so we've done our best to include as many comments as possible. Of course, we're looking to the 2005 general plan. That was really the starting point, as well as state land use designations and the existing zoning. And then particularly in our urban areas, access to infrastructure was a primary goal. And then the last one, similar to the transitions mentioned above, but really better utilizing the rural designation to make that transition between urban uses and agricultural uses. And you'll see that up here next. So this is a diagram that's in the land use methodology report that's under our reports and resources on our website. And you can see here the rural designation from 2005, and we've increased that quite a bit, again, to make a more distinctive transition between urban uses and agricultural uses. Resort and industrial stayed about the same, although you see this distinction between light industrial uses, which can also include different industrial service type industries, versus heavy industry that really needs more buffer and separation from other uses. And then we look to the urban expansion, which, as defined, it allows for anything between up to high density urban uses to low density urban uses. And so we look to make more distinctions about that and to try to more specifically utilize it. You'll see in some maps in a few minutes. So we look to better designate where high, medium, and low density uses might be better suited to just urban expansion that, again, allows for all of these kind of uses within that area. So you'll see a decrease in urban expansion overall. This is an example of the Kona urban area in the maps, where we increased a lot of the conservation in the area consistent with state land use conservation, as well as on some public lands, more natural areas in the urban core. You can also see the 2005, the existing plan really has kind of a swath of urban expansion, which again, all could be designated in as high density urban. We've tried to be more intentional about where these uses might be, with looking at high density is in the red, transitioning to medium density, for example, then transition to low density, and then rural and agriculture. And so we tried in all of the different areas to try to make better distinctions between those different types of uses. This is a snapshot of the South Hilo or Hilo urban area. Again, this is 2005. There were fewer changes in Hilo, but there were some sort of changes and switches in the rural areas. We added some more rural area outside of the urban boundary. And then this urban, for example, was already developed as a low density urban. So we switched that and added some rural designations on the outside of that. And we have reverted back this urban expansion area along the coastline back to, or proposing to, back to extensive agriculture. You can also see around the airport more distinctions of the high density or high heavy industrial areas and the low industrial areas, or light industrial areas or service industry. In agriculture, there were a few changes. For productive ag, is what we were proposing is simply a name change that currently is important agricultural lands, and that has been an ongoing confusion over the years between the state land use important agriculture lands and the county general plan important agriculture lands. So we've gotten a lot of feedback on this, and we're asked to make a name change. And so we've done that to productive ag, since really the intention of this name of important ag lands had everything to do with the productivity of the land itself. Orchard was from the 2005. If it's in orchard, it's productive for the most part. And so that simply was added to productive ag. And then natural was added for lands that are more in passive use and intended to remain either in a natural state or largely open space and agricultural uses. And so natural, it could include natural hazards, it could include steep slopes, lava fields that are not productive, public lands that are not in state land use conservation, and things like that. We also included some Malca lands that are forested, although some of those areas also include more agricultural pasture lands in the natural area you'll see in a few minutes on the map. just to preserve those lands for water recharge, whether it be in pasture or in forest lands. And then we shifted away from the open designation in the existing plan to recreation and conservation, although some of those open lands may have gone into the natural, but quite a bit of the some of the extensive agriculture lands went into natural as well. But the recreation is really intended for more of the active recreational lands, things like parks and golf courses, and shoreline setback areas that are not in state land use conservation, so more in the urban areas where there is more of an active recreational type use. And then conservation has not changed as really being the forest and water reserves, and consistent with state land use conservation as well. The 2005 did have a pond designation or does have a pond designation that we have added to the conservation designation, since those waters generally are under conservation anyway. And then what that looks like on the map, you can see some of these Malca areas have reverted to a natural designation. We've increased some of the conservation lands, and recreation has basically stayed about the same as open designation, but then you can see more of this distinction between natural lands, extensive agriculture, and productive agriculture.
Okay, we do have several questions. At this point, we're going to pause the presentations and try to answer some questions. Here we go, panelists. Question number one is, what makes this a workshop versus a presentation with limited question and answer session?
Great question. So we are doing questions and answers, but we have heard from the last few working sessions that we've had that they really wanted a presentation, that members of the public have really requested more of a presentation. And frankly, we're in that stage of the overall planning process. Very early on in the process, we did a lot more hands-on workshops and charrettes and things like that. Then we moved into different types of community meetings that had stations where people could walk around and talk directly and have dialogue directly with planners that had either planners or department and agency representatives who had more subject matter expertise. And now we're at that point where this is the final recommended draft that we will then be moving through the adoption process. And so we are doing more of a presentation style. Again, that's been part of our request. The general plan calls these workshops, the current 2005 and the comprehensive review process that's laid out in the general plan refers to these as workshops. And so in order to make sure we're consistent with the process, we are using that terminology as well.
Thank you. Next question. Why is there no action for protecting the public trust in the draft general plan? Can read it again if you
Sure.
like.
No, I can address that. Thank you, Joel. So there are a number of actions that address public trust, and for anybody who doesn't understand what that is, public trust really refers to those natural and cultural resources that I was speaking to in the collaborative biocultural stewardship chapter, that we have a duty to protect and preserve, again, for future generations. And so when we look at the organization of the plan, the details really get spelled out down at the action level. The policies stay still pretty high level, and then the specifics get laid out in the actions. And so those public trust resources when we look at the actions, I think starting on page 42 of the document, you're going to see a lot of very specific resources that are addressed by those actions. Everything from our watersheds, our forest cover, our wetland habitats. Again, sort of all of those specific resources get addressed by a very specific action rather than a broad policy regarding public trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Great questions, folks. Keep them coming. Next question. What criteria or guidance was used in establishing the ratios shown for the changes of the 2024 land use?
Could you repeat that? Ratios?
Of course. What criteria or guidance was used in establishing the ratios shown for the changes of the 2024 land use section, I think is what they mean to say.
Okay. I'm not quite sure what the ratio part means, but a few slides back, we talked about what guided our land use process and land use decisions. And a lot of that came from the community development plans. For those that were very detailed and specific, we really just adopted what the community development plan had called for, given the robust immediate community and regional community in those areas that have done that work. And so otherwise, I think outlined again on that slide where we talked about the CDPs and the other types of land uses, other master plans and things like that have really guided the overall process in proposing what we have now in the general land use maps, general plan land use maps.
Yeah, I think that answered it. It was, I think it's referring to the bar graphs that were shown, you know, the before and after, and that change that you pointed out.
Yeah, so the land use was not done to reflect particular percentages or ratios. That was just a result. Those bar charts were really just a result of putting all of the sort of guidance that we used into the maps. And so that's really what resulted from that work.
Thank you very much.
It's also further outlined in our land use methodology reports that are again in the reports and resource section of our website.
Thank you. Next question. Are these maps available in the general plan 2045?
Yes, the maps are in both the document and they're also available on an interactive website.
Very good. That is all the questions I have for this section.
Okay, great. So we will turn this over to Natasha.
Thank you. I'll be going over transportation and public facilities and utilities. And so starting off in transportation, we're really looking at how transportation is integrated with our land use. And so if you look at this little chart here, we kind of start and see this cycle where if you have a change in land use, you'll usually see an increase in traffic, which may lead to a deterioration of level of service. Then in turn, arterial improvements that will also then increase accessibility and then lead to, again, this iterative cycle of a change in land use. So this section really is looking at how do we mitigate some of this increased traffic and mitigate deterioration of level of service. We also want to integrate that with our sustainability and stewardship themes of energy efficiency. I think as Bethany has mentioned, the transportation sector is the largest consumer of energy and the largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions. What we heard from the CDPs is a need for more multimodal connectivity. integration with land use, and asset management and alternative routes. So our overall transportation goal is that each community is connected by a multimodal and modernized transportation network that provides a safe and efficient, comfortable movement of people and goods. So to achieve this goal, we look at several objectives. Our first objective is an overall objective of achieving that system that is consistent and will accommodate our planned growth. Here we have several maps of proposed roadway projects, either extensions, rehabilitations, or new roadways. Now, to help also offset increased traffic, we also then have to look at reprioritizing how we design these roadways, giving priority to pedestrians, transit, and bicyclists over automobiles to help increase our active transportation and reduce VMT. So one way we can reduce VMT is to help invest in some of our more active transportation systems, really looking at public access and increasing connectivity, looking at active living corridors through our urban centers, and investing in mass transit. Again, all of this is to help reach a goal or objective of reducing vehicle miles traveled. Our next set of objectives really look at the street landscape. Again, making sure that multimodal transportation in our right-of-way is available to all. Looking at different ways we can provide space for everything. As you can see in the top, we have landscape that makes walking and biking more pleasant while still having space for on-street parking and two-way travel. So we're really looking at transportation for all modes at a community scale. In our second diagram here, we're really looking at, in terms of complete streets, also managing storm water runoff and landscaping again. And this is a really good example of how our transportation system really is the pathway to serving our communities with other infrastructure. Lastly, our transportation objectives end with maintaining the public transportation system. So really that's looking at asset management with the concept of that good roads cost less. If we're continually maintaining it, the cost to repair or end of life for our transportation system can be less. And also, in the state of Hawaii, we have the most bridges of all the counties. And so that is also a place where asset management is really critical, especially during emergency events or even just day-to-day life. Lastly, we have accessibility. Oh, sorry. And lastly, the transportation section does touch upon our harbors and airports. And while we don't, as a county, own these facilities, we do want to make sure that we have connectivity and that we're supporting the state's efforts in modernizing these infrastructure. And so for public utilities, the primary themes of public utility is very similar to that of transportation. We're looking at sustainability and resilience of water resources, environmental protection, asset management. Our overall goal is to adequately serve by sustainable and efficient public infrastructure, utilities, and services based on growth needs with sound design principles and effective maintenance practices. One of the biggest concepts in this chapter, it really looks at the discussion of One Water, something that we see happening on Oahu. And it's the idea that the water resources, whether it be groundwater, storm runoff, and or wastewater, really is one entity, and that collaboratively we can work together to make sure we're either reusing our water, collecting storm water for other resources or reuses, reusing gray water, whether that be in a closed system, like in a building, reusing its gray water for irrigation or landscape maintenance, or moving that discussion really toward a county-wide effort in reclaiming water for either ag use, collecting stormwater and reducing our runoff and erosion into the ocean. So the discussion behind this really is more of a collaborative stance. And it really would help in delivering a better infrastructure system if we can have these discussions. Lastly, in this section, we do talk about energy efficiency and broadband expansion. And while the county, again, does not own or operate these utilities, there are policies and objectives that support renewable energy and the expansion of broadband into our rural areas so that there is access for all. And lastly, we're looking at public facilities. Our goal is communities are safe and protected and have access to integrated health, education, and social services to support a high quality of life for all residents. We do have policies and actions that support the health and well-being of all visitors, looking at mental health, looking at healthcare, and supporting those industries, as well as other healthcare facilities that are community-based care, looking at how we can get community-based care in our rural areas. For the county, one of our major objectives is achieving zero waste by 2045. And for our parks and recs, really looking at facilities that are within a 10-minute walk distance in our urban areas and a 10-minute drive within rural communities.
Thank you, Natasha. We're going to take a few more questions at this break. First question, are evacuations from natural disasters accounted for within the infrastructure and transportation components of the plan?
The plan does speak toward using creating evacuation routes, but not necessarily spells out where they are on the map. That kind of planning really does need to happen at a more detailed level for each county. So while the general plan supports that effort and has policies to speak toward it, more work really does need to be done at a community level to identify those places. We do also have language that establishes either active transportation corridors that are in its everyday use would be for either pedestrian or bicycling, and then to use that for emergency egress from communities during time of natural disaster.
Thank you very much. Next question. How can members of the public obtain a hard copy of the current draft plan?
Hi, sure. You can email us at generalplan@hawaii.gov, and if I don't know if we can put that into something to the participants, if we have a chat that we can send out to the participants, but it's general plan. I think it might be on our last slide, and I definitely have it on our handouts and things like that, but generalplan@hawaiicounty.gov, and send us your address and we will send you or swing by the office in either Kona or Hilo locations, and we have copies available.
Great, thank you. Next question, where can I find the interactive website?
Sure, we also have links on our county website. So if you go to our county planning department website, click on general plan and then comprehensive. I think it's actually on, it's in two different places. When you first click on general plan, it's on that front page. And then if you also click on comprehensive review under the general plan, it takes you to another page that spells out the years of the different parts of the process and everything that was done within that time frame. And if you click on 2024, there will be a link in there as well.
Thank you very much. Next question. Has anyone considered a train around the island?
I wouldn't say that there's been talks specifically about train, but we are trying to build up our transit network with our our mass transit administration's multimodal mass transit and multimodal master plan from 2018. So really building out the spoke and hub system that was presented in that plan. I think we do have other, that isn't really a prescribed thing in the general plan right now, but definitely something to talk about as we go forward in mass transit planning.
Thank you, Natasha. Next question. Will the roadway and green infrastructure concepts be incorporated into the Department of Public Works standards?
In the GP, we do have some standards laid out in terms of what is available. We do have the Complete Streets manual. Well, it's called the County of Hawaii Street Design Manual, which is incorporating complete streets. That does also speak to green design through its landscape section. It is still it is adopted by resolution. As far as standards for DPW, the manual is really used and has flexibility for DPW to use, but there is policies within the GP that speak toward green infrastructure, stormwater management. And then again, this kind of goes back to the discussion of One Water in the utilities section, because One Water is, while we have wastewater and we do have the Department of Water Supply, DPW does manage stormwater. And as a community grow, we're gonna start needing to look more at how we manage that stormwater better. And there'll be later, as we gain population, we'll have to update our storm water management plan to MS4. So that's I can't think off the top of my head what that stands for right now. But again, it's a little bit more of a detailed plan that will come later along. But in the broader sense, yes, we do have policies that do speak to green infrastructure in the plan.
Thank you. And yeah,
Tasha, I think I would add to that on complete streets and multimodal. I think we do have policies and actions that speak to adopting updated ordinances, code amendments to incorporate more of these alternative multimodal street options. So the plan does that as well.
thank you very much. Last question for now. For mass transit, what type of transit will be used?
Currently, mass transit uses a bus system. So the general plan really speaks toward and points to MTA's mass transit and multimodal master plan from 2018. So we still have a lot of work to do in that area, but for the most part, we're looking at our bus system as a mass transit system.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, so housing for all. The goals and objectives in this section really speak toward creating adequate and affordable housing to meet the needs of the population, provide equitable opportunity for households, which include flexibility and mobility. We were coupling that again with transportation, and not having to rely on solely your car. Some ways we can do this is diversify and expand housing, manage existing housing, and create affordable housing. One way we can really create affordable housing, again, they're kind of very integrated, but we can really look at diversifying and expanding our housing options. So we all kind of are very familiar. This is kind of what we normally look for in homes. I'd say in Hilo, most of the homes here are this. We do have a few apartments and condos, but for a good majority of us, we live in a single family house. But that it doesn't necessarily isn't the right fit for everyone. So how do we diversify and expand housing? Well, we know we don't want this, even though we may have in our land use, start talking about medium and high density. We don't want to be Honolulu. So what does that mean? We really do need to start looking at the missing middle housing. Our zoning and our land use, I do think supports this, but our housing section really looks toward expanding and diversifying housing by looking at different types before we even get to a mid-rise structure. Supporting duplex or side-by-side stacked housing, courtyard building, cottage court, and townhomes to really diversify the types of housing that fit other people's needs. For example, I am a household of 6. I definitely need kind of more of a single family home with a lot of space, whereas maybe some of my colleagues are empty nesters and are looking to downsize. So to increase that opportunity, we seek these kinds of housing solutions so that we can open up single family housings for the bigger families while still letting kupuna or those with other needs really seek the right size of housing for themselves. Lastly, I'll be sharing about integrated systems, and that's really looking at collaboration. Next slide. So the primary themes here are, as I said, collaboration, fiscal integrity, how we respond as a county with effective public services, the alignment of our county function with state function, and integration of our sustainability and equity goals. Touching upon collaboration, we have a lot of opportunity in the county to work and get rid of the silos that really would help give us more, again, as a county, be able to deliver projects more efficiently. One example, again, as I mentioned before, in the Complete Streets diagram, you really do have all of these infrastructure that is carried through our community to our communities by our roadways. And so if we can collaborate more so that we can do one dig, we do have a lot of aging infrastructure across the board, aging pipes from DPW and needing to upgrade pumps from wastewater. So a good example is our Keawe Street rehabilitation, where we really encouraged DPW and DEM to take the opportunity to update their systems in our downtown Hilo area while DPW was doing a roadway project. So really looking for opportunities more like that. And then again, fiscal integrity is really like utilizing our capital improvement project budget to really plan for the future and look at a 6-year project. That way, that can help increase collaboration. We all know what we're doing at the same time. And I hand it up back to April.
Thank you. So regarding the economic section of the plan, the goal is to have an economy that is diverse, regenerative, and innovative, while also improving the financial well-being of our residents with a focus on increasing local economic opportunities. And so we look to, the objectives really look to improve access to all levels of education and training, increase the growth and health of small businesses, which are vital in our economic network, and incorporating resilience, diversity, and innovation in county programs and plans to support healthy economic development and revitalization. So in looking at agriculture and food systems in particular, agriculture, the goal for agriculture is really that it be a robust and diversified sector that addresses food security and includes a broad range of agricultural-based businesses. And the objectives really point to increasing the access to the land for especially the productive agriculture land, for active food production, as well as increasing the infrastructure that serves that agricultural land in some areas that don't get adequate rainfall. For example, we may need to increase availability of water sources and the like. And then as it relates to our visitor industry, it's the largest industry in the county and the state economically, and a lot of people, a lot of residents depend on the visitor industry, but it's also critical that we maintain a high quality of life for the residents with a regenerative visitor industry that balances the preservation of our natural and cultural resources with responsible visitation. And so, the plan includes policies and actions to try to implement various actions and support the visitor industry with connection to community and with the INA and with our historic and multicultural heritage, while also really providing more of an island authentic experience for the people who come and visit our island that's special and unique and that's particular to our island and our places. So I will turn this over to Bethany.
Okay, we're getting close, folks. Hang with us. Really important that not only do we have a good plan, but that implementation is really strategized. And so there's been a lot of energy spent on this particular chapter to update things that were included in the 2005 plan, but make it more robust and transparent. So looking at, how do we continue to engage residents as this plan gets implemented, making sure that it's a long-term and holistic approach. A lot of work going into consistency with policies around implementation. One of the things that we did when we started this update was looking at our 2005 plan, and it called for a lot of code updates, for example, zoning code updates. And so without those updates being done, really you can't effectively implement a plan like this. And so this implementation section really prioritizes that kind of action. Also, as has been noted multiple times, the importance of interagency collaboration is really a key component of this implementation. And finally, a system that will go over about evaluation and monitoring. This graphic should look familiar, as Endo introduced it at the beginning of this presentation. And really just thinking about implementation of the general plan actually occurs at all of these lower levels. So from our community development plans to our functional plans, how we address mass transit, how we, again, look at our regulatory codes, so making sure that our zoning code actually implements the policies that are here in the draft general plan. And then finally getting down to the boots on the ground and how these things play out in our permitting processes and how we invest in our capital improvements and programs. For monitoring and evaluation, really important part of this is the prioritization and phasing that has been included in this draft. And so if you look at that section, you'll see that there are 4 phases that are being proposed. And again, this is thinking about making sure that we can actually implement this plan that we've worked hard for. So the first phase you're going to see really talks to, again, sort of those consistency efforts. So making sure that our codes get updated to be consistent with this adopted plan when it gets adopted, and making sure that our administrative rules as far as how we're implementing, again, all those things need to be adopted, addressed and changed to match the adopted plan. And then finally getting into, how do we prioritize our infrastructure investments based on, the needs of the land use and things like that. So the phases are laid out, again, to sort of provide that guide and make sure that there's a focus on what things are we doing first and second to get this implemented. Finally, thinking about measurable indicators or performance measures to look at how well we are doing. Not only are we addressing some of the consistency issues, but we want to check in with ourselves and make sure that we're heading in the right direction when we look at our goals and objectives of the plan. And so this is looking at things like, example here is from the Collaborative Biocultural Stewardship chapter, thinking about, are we increasing or are we decreasing our native habitat coverage? How is our clean water standards? Are we getting better or getting worse? How many community groups are really involved in that collaborative stewardship? So these are things that we can look at to understand our performance of implementation. And then finally, again, thinking about transparency, making sure that we're reporting out how well we're doing to members of our public and our decision makers. This can be done in a number of ways. We have a mayor's annual report that goes to the county council every year. And so that can be a mechanism for reporting implementation of this general plan. Also calls for a 5-year implementation status report. So that's kind of looking through all the actions and seeing what things have been completed and what things remain to be prioritized. And then finally, the comprehensive review and update process will, of course, consider how well we did on implementation and things that need to be adjusted for the next comprehensive review and update.
Okay, thank you all. I'm gonna ask that we address a few more questions before the last sequence of slides, if that's okay. First question, is there a process of changing the land use pattern allocation guide designations after general plan adoption?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. Yes, there is. It's called an interim amendment process, which can be initiated to county council, and then it goes through planning commission and then back to county council for final consideration and adoption if additional changes are requested or needed after the adoption of the general plan.
Thank you. Next question. Can you share some of the practical effects of more open land being classified as natural versus extensive agriculture compared to the 2005 land use pattern allocation guide?
Sure, the intention was specific to extensive ag lands that fit a few different criteria, one of which I spoke to was in higher elevations, to make sure those are preserved as that and not hopefully not developed into urban uses or things like that, even with an agricultural designation. The natural just sort of further describes the intention behind holding those lands in its current state, be it natural or, excuse me, be it in agricultural such as pasture or forested lands. It does still not change the underlying zoning. So I will reiterate that the existing zoning still is still applies to any of those lands. But it also includes lands such as historic lava flows that are not productive in other areas like that.
Thank you very much. Next question, before using any land for transportation, will the Department of Transportation do a title search to make sure it's a clear title?
Sorry. I think with regards to the State Department of Transportation, they always make sure either when acquiring land that they have clean titles. So that might be more a question for HDOT than for us at the county level.
Thank you, Natasha. Next question, does this plan go into any detail regarding zero waste plans for refuse?
Again, this is more of a high level look. So objectives kind of speak toward high level policies to support zero waste. And then any other more detailed plan still needs to be formalized.
Thank you. Next question, is one of the general plan's goals to convert our towns and urban areas into 15-minute smart cities?
Our general plan does not speak to 15-minute cities. It really speaks to what has been the work that's been done with community, both in their community development plans and what they want for their community and their urban areas, and also the work that's been done with community through this general plan process.
Thank you, April. Next question, does the general plan address the need for single-family housing?
Yes, in the housing section, it does.
Great. Next question, will the recording of this webinar be available to the general public?
Yes, it will. We have a recording of one of the in-person workshops that should be online in the next few days. And then this one, as soon as we receive the recording from this one, we plan to also make that available.
Excellent. Next question, is there a distinction between a long-term resident of Hawaii Island, and then in parentheses, someone rooted in the community and its interests for the long term versus transient or short-term residents?
Good question. Yes, there is a distinction between long-term residents and transient or short-term stays on the island and in the county. That is not specifically addressed in the general plan, but it is addressed in our county code. And I believe part of it is in some aspects of it, I think, are in our tax code as it relates to long-term residents as well. So it shows up in a couple of different places in our code.
Great, thank you. Okay, lastly, in the question answer section here, I just wanted everybody to understand that we are capturing all of your questions If we don't get to all of them, we will try to include them in the FAQ section on the website, the frequently asked questions section, so you can look for them there. But all of these questions will be captured and put into the portfolio of comments and questions as a part of this whole process. So thank you very much for the quality questions. All of this goes into having a plan that represents a collective vision. It requires the wisdom of an entire community, and we do need your input. We put together a robust engagement strategy to provide frequent updates and information, as well as give everyone an opportunity to participate in the way that it fits best for them. We invite you to follow us on social media, where you'll be able to see regular posts and updates of events happening around the island. We're also working with communities to provide presentations at community meetings. As you can see here, we've got the dates listed. For more information, there's a slide that talks about for more information with a QR code. There we go. Here you can see all the different resources that we have available online. I did have fun navigating through the recommended draft general plan interface. Very smart to use, very interesting search functions. Here's the QR codes for those if you want to use your phones and snap those. But really, if you go to the Hawaii County website and you get to the planning department page, you'll be able to easily navigate to the general plan information that you seek. Very easily searchable. Just want to thank everyone for attending this presentation workshop this evening. Thank you very much. Mahalo. We do have a closing poll for everybody to check out. Here we go.
Hey, Joel, oh, it's going. I'm also going to go ahead and go to the last slide because it does have the general plan email, phone number, and then the website address as well.
Very good. And I see that the closing poll popped up on my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone, for the valuable feedback and questions.